What women keep silent about holds the power to change the life of anyone willing to listen. Socrates. There's something women whisper in the dark, not with their mouths, with their bones. Something they never say out loud, not because it's shameful, but because it's sacred. You felt it. In the silence after a long day, when no one thanks you for what you carried. When you walk into a room and instinctively read everyone's emotions, but no one reads yours. There's a prayer women say without words. It's not to God. It's to the part of themselves that refuses to fall apart, even when everything else already has. That prayer sounds like, "I'll get through this. They need me strong. I'll rest when it's done." It sounds like silence, like pouring tea for someone else when your own soul is dehydrated, like wiping tears from a child's face while yours burn behind your eyes, like staying calm when the storm is inside you. Women don't say this prayer to others, because the moment they do, the illusion breaks, and this world, it feeds on their silence. You are taught to hold everything in, to be soft and unbreakable at the same time, to smile while bleeding internally, to survive beautifully. But survival is not life, and strength is not numbness. You didn't imagine the weight. You didn't fail at being enough. You're carrying the emotional inheritance of generations, and no one taught you how to lay it down. This is the secret. Not a ritual, not a spell, but a quiet, aching whisper inside every woman. Don't fall. Not yet. Not here. And even when your body screams, you keep going. Because that's what you were taught. Because no one ever gave you permission to stop. But what if stopping is exactly what heals you? What if that sacred prayer is ready to change form? Not into more silence, but into truth. If these words ache like they're yours, subscribe to this channel. Let others who've carried too much hear what's never said out loud. And join the Telegram. That's where we say what we're not allowed to say here. You've heard them. Those quiet affirmations women say under their breath when no one's listening. Not the Instagram kind. Not the pretty ones with lavender backgrounds. The real ones. I can't break now. They wouldn't understand anyway. As long as everyone's okay, I'll be fine. These are not just phrases. They are survival codes, passed from mother to daughter, woman to woman. Not taught directly, but absorbed. Through glances, through expectations, through silence. This is how women learn to pray without praying. Not with hope, but with pressure. Not for miracles, but for strength to endure what should never have been theirs to carry. Behind every perfectly managed schedule, behind the calm voice during chaos, behind the ability to hold everyone else's emotions, there is that one unspoken sentence: I have no room for my own pain. Society calls it grace. Family calls it reliability. The workplace calls it professionalism. But what it really is, suppression, spiritual dehydration, emotional exile. Women have become fluent in the art of disappearing in plain sight. They can hold space for everyone else while their own needs slowly turn to dust. And the cruelest part? The world praises them for it. The quieter they suffer, the louder the applause. This is where the real illusion begins. Because people think they know what strength looks like. They picture a woman standing tall, speaking clearly, never breaking. But that's not strength. That's exhaustion in a dress. That's chronic self-denial, repackaged as confidence. That's trauma pretending to be leadership. The real strength is buried deep in the moments no one sees. When she lets herself cry without guilt. When she admits, I can't do this alone. when she finally says no without explaining why. But those aren't the things she's rewarded for. She's rewarded for smiling on empty, for being useful, agreeable, low maintenance, for being a concept, not a human being. The more invisible her pain, the more desirable she becomes. The more silent her needs, the more lovable she appears. This is how the world keeps her trapped, by making her believe that her value lies in her erasure. And so, she continues the prayer. It's okay, I've got this. I'm just tired. It's not a big deal. But it is. It's a very big deal. Because inside that repetition is a nervous system that never gets to rest. A heart that doesn't remember what softness feels like. A soul that's been on mute for decades. And the longer she repeats it, the more disconnected she becomes from herself. This is the true cost of the secret prayer. Not just emotional fatigue, but identity loss. Because the more a woman denies her truth, the less she knows who she really is. And over time, the affirmations meant to protect her turn into chains. What once felt like resilience becomes imprisonment. And all that's left is a shell, functioning, smiling, responding, but gone. This isn't dramatic. This is normal. That's the tragedy. Millions of women living in performance mode with no one asking what it's costing them. And if you're one of them, you're not weak, you're not broken. You've just been trained to suppress your own humanity. It's not your fault that you forgot how to speak your truth, but it is your right to remember. And it starts by questioning that prayer. Who taught you to say it? Who benefits when you repeat it? What would happen if you stopped? That's where the real transformation begins, not by adding new affirmations, but by unlearning the ones that kept you small. Strength has become a costume. Women wear it so convincingly that even they start to believe it's who they are. But underneath, there's something raw, something ancient, a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of emotional weight no one else sees. This is not about drama, it's about survival, about having to function through grief, loss, betrayal, disappointment, and still show up like everything is fine. Because the world rewards performance, not presence. You break down in private, you rebuild in silence. And then you come back, painted in composure, ready to serve again. Many women don't even realize they're performing, because the roles have become second nature. The reliable one, the fixer, the understanding partner, the emotionally available parent, the calm friend. They don't notice how much they're suppressing until something inside finally says, I can't. But by then, they're so far into the role that they fear dropping it will make everything fall apart. That's the prison of being the strong one. You get trapped in the identity of being the one who holds it all together. And you forget that you were never meant to carry it all in the first place. Biology plays its role. Evolution taught women to attune to the emotional climate around them, to detect danger, to manage conflict, to keep the tribe safe. But that ancient intelligence becomes dangerous when it's twisted into emotional overfunctioning. Women become the thermostat of everyone else's nervous systems, adjusting themselves to keep others comfortable. It's a skill rooted in survival, but it comes at a cost. Self-erasure. You can't listen to your own inner voice if you're constantly tuning into everyone else's. The world doesn't question this. In fact, it normalizes it. She's so put together. She always knows what to do. She never complains. These statements sound like compliments, but they're red flags in disguise. Because what they really mean is, she's useful, predictable, emotionally contained. No one asks what it's doing to her. No one wonders what it takes to maintain that image. And she knows that if she stops, the support system others rely on might collapse. So she keeps praying the silent prayer. Just one more day, just a little longer, just until they're okay. This is why so many women break in midlife. Not because they're weak, but because the system they've been running on finally crashes. It's not burnout, it's betrayal. A lifetime of being everything for everyone except themselves. And when it finally erupts, it doesn't look like screaming. It looks like numbness, disconnection, quiet panic, a deep questioning. Is this all there is? Who am I if I'm not needed? These questions don't come from nowhere. They come from the soul, knocking, begging, demanding to be heard after years of silence. There's nothing wrong with you if you've hit this point. In fact, it means something inside you is still alive, still fighting for you, still asking for truth. This is where the prayer changes, not into surface-level positivity, but into radical honesty, a new kind of strength, one that doesn't depend on being useful, quiet, or good, a strength that's messy, emotional, and real. And it starts with one sentence: I'm allowed to stop. Let that be the new prayer. Let that be the beginning of your return to yourself. Not every woman could say it out loud, but the body always knew. The body remembered the grief that had no words, the anger that had no place, the fear that had no witness, and so it stored it, in tight jaws, in stiff shoulders, in clenched stomachs. The prayer didn't just live in thoughts, it lived in the posture, in the breath, in the skin. Stay strong. Hold it in. Don't show too much. This conditioning didn't start with you. It's centuries deep. Your mother had it. Her mother had it. Their survival depended on silence, and so the silence became sacred. But sacred doesn't mean healthy. It just means untouchable. And that's what has to change. History has taught women that being heard is dangerous. Women who spoke too boldly were called hysterical, punished, silenced. So over time, many learned to express themselves in code, through care, through overgiving, through perfection. The prayer evolved from words into behavior. Instead of saying, I'm not okay, she bakes something, overfunctions, manages everyone's emotions. Instead of saying, I need help, she smiles wider, works harder, says, I've got it. This is the modern version of the secret prayer. It's not always verbal. Sometimes it's hidden in overachievement. Sometimes in pretending not to care. Sometimes in being so competent that no one even thinks to ask how you're doing. But the body always tells the truth. It breaks down when the soul is ignored for too long. Panic attacks, autoimmune issues, burnout, numbness, these aren't random. They're messages, not symptoms to fix, but signals to listen to. The prayer is no longer working. The strategy of self-erasure is collapsing. And deep inside, that's terrifying. Because if you stop being what everyone expects you to be, who are you then? This is where many women feel lost, not because they've failed, but because they've spent so long performing a version of themselves that the real one feels unfamiliar, even threatening. Some women reach this point and try to double down. More therapy, more yoga, more self-help. But healing isn't another performance. It's not something you check off. Real healing begins the moment you stop trying to improve yourself and start listening to yourself. That's where the new form of the prayer begins. What do I actually feel? What do I truly want? Where does it hurt? These questions sound simple, but they are revolutionary in a world that has trained women to ignore their own inner life. They are not soft, they are fierce, because they reclaim what was stolen, the right to be a full human being. There's a reason this kind of healing feels uncomfortable. It threatens the roles you've been applauded for. The strong one, the capable one, the peacemaker. When you start to question those roles, people around you might resist. They're used to you being easy, predictable, always there. So when you start saying, no, or not now, or this doesn't feel right, it shakes the system. But that discomfort is necessary, because if your healing doesn't disturb anything, it's not real healing. Real healing changes the way you live, not just the way you feel. And the first step is this: stop repeating the old prayer, the one that says, I'll be fine. Start speaking a new one, the one that says, I'm done pretending. There were always women who broke the silence. Not many, not often, but enough to leave traces. Some through words, some through art, some simply by refusing to apologize for their truth. These weren't always famous women, though names like Virginia Woolf, Frida Kahlo, and Simone de Beauvoir come to mind. They were women who bled in public, not for attention, but for liberation. They said what others only dared to think. And when they did, something shifted, not just in their lives, but in the collective nervous system of women everywhere. Because every time one woman told the truth about her pain, she gave 1,000 others permission to stop pretending. These women didn't speak in polished affirmations. They spoke in raw confessions. Virginia wrote about the madness she couldn't control. Frida painted the pain she couldn't explain. Simone dissected the systems that buried women under roles. They didn't offer answers. They offered mirrors. And in doing so, they did something radical. They stopped praying to be accepted and started declaring their reality. That's what made them dangerous. Not their intellect, not their creativity, but their refusal to stay quiet. And that refusal still echoes today, even when their names are forgotten. There's power in being seen without performance, but it's a terrifying power, because the moment you stop performing strength, people start reacting. They get uncomfortable, disappointed, confused. They say things like, "You've changed," or "What's wrong with you?" But what's really happening is that your truth is disrupting the illusion they were comfortable with. That's the price of honesty. It will cost you the version of you that made other people feel safe. And for many women, that price feels too high. So they shrink back. They go silent again. They pick up the old prayer, the one that says, "Don't make others uncomfortable." But not all reactions are negative. Sometimes, when you finally speak your truth, someone looks at you and says, "Me too." That moment of recognition is sacred. It creates a ripple, and soon others begin to speak. That's how change begins. Not through mass movements, but through small acts of honesty between souls. And here's where men come in. Not to lead, not to fix, but to witness. There is a kind of male presence that doesn't interrupt, doesn't advise, doesn't shrink in the face of emotion. It simply stays. That presence is rare, but when it exists, it becomes a sanctuary for truth. Men who can hold space for women's truth without fear or ego. They are not weak. They are not emasculated. They are whole, because they've made peace with their own vulnerability. They've stopped performing strength and started embodying it. And in doing so, they become allies in the deepest sense. Not protectors from pain, but partners in healing. That's where real intimacy begins, when both people stop playing roles and start showing up as they are. And it begins with one simple shift: listening without needing to control the narrative. The women who speak their truth and the men who stay to hear it are rewriting something ancient. They are creating space for a new kind of prayer, one that doesn't beg to be loved, One that doesn't ask for permission. One that simply states, "This is what's real." That prayer isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Its power is in its clarity. And once it's spoken, something irreversible happens. The mask doesn't fit anymore. The role loses its grip. And for the first time in a long time, you feel your own soul returning home. There's something women do that goes unnoticed by most, but it shapes the emotional atmosphere of every relationship they enter. They monitor everything: the tone of voice, the micro-reactions, the unsaid tension in a room. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition, built through survival. From a young age, many girls learn that peace depends on their ability to sense danger before it arrives. They become emotional translators, therapists without training, caretakers without rest. And the world calls it intuition, even praises it, without ever asking what it costs. Because behind that intuition is hypervigilance, and behind that hypervigilance is trauma. This pattern doesn't only belong to women, but women have been conditioned to master it, to anticipate others' needs before their own are even formed, to read silence like a language, to feel responsible for moods they didn't create. That's why so many women find themselves in one-sided relationships, not because they're weak, but because they've been taught to measure love by how much they can endure. The secret prayer continues here. If I'm patient enough, kind enough, calm enough, they'll finally see me. But the problem isn't that they don't see you. The problem is that your entire presence has been shaped around being useful to others. This is where resentment is born, quiet at first, a soft ache, then louder, a rage that feels out of place, shameful even. Why am I so angry? Because your needs have been ignored for years, mostly by you. Because you thought love meant shrinking, compromising, absorbing. And now, your body is rebelling. Your soul is knocking. Your boundaries are bleeding. And the world tells you to relax, to not be so emotional, to be grateful. But gratitude doesn't cancel out neglect. And self-sacrifice is not a virtue when it leads to self-erasure. Men can learn something vital here, not just how to listen, but how to mirror what women have modeled for centuries. The capacity to hold space, to attune, to feel without rushing to fix. This is not about becoming less masculine. It's about becoming more whole. Strength without tenderness is just control, and control has never healed anything. What heals is presence, stillness, willingness to sit in discomfort without trying to shut it down. That's a lesson men can learn from the emotional labor women have carried silently for generations. Imagine what would happen if men began to practice their own version of the secret prayer. Not a prayer for power or certainty, but a quiet truth like, I don't have all the answers. I feel lost too. I'm ready to listen. These are not confessions of weakness. They are invitations to connection, and they change everything. Because when men begin to feel safely, women begin to rest. When men stop requiring women to be emotional guides, women can finally return to their own inner landscapes. And what happens then is not chaos, it's balance. This is not about blame, it's about awareness. The roles we inherit are not our fault, but they are our responsibility to examine. And when both men and women begin to unlearn the stories they were given, that's when real partnership becomes possible. Not roles, not scripts, but presence. And in that presence, something sacred unfolds, a kind of mutual witnessing, where no one has to disappear to be loved, where no one has to perform to be safe, where both prayers, his and hers, can be spoken in the open, and finally heard. You were never meant to carry all of it alone. Not the silence, not the expectations, not the weight of everyone else's peace. That secret prayer you've been repeating for years. It served you. It kept you standing. But now, it's time to lay it down. Not in shame, in honor. Because the real strength isn't in holding everything in. It's in choosing to be seen without the armor. And if you've recognized yourself in these words, even in fragments, you're not alone. There's a quiet revolution happening, one truth at a time. If this touched something real in you, subscribe to the channel. Let the algorithm carry this to someone else who's still praying in silence. Join the Telegram. There, we speak without filters. And if you saw yourself here, write in the comments, "I no longer run from pain." Let's see how many of us are done pretending. This isn't the end. It's the first honest step back to yourself.